Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Elle. I'm a painter and a printmaker, and this is a video series where we talk about some of the finer details of printmaking. In my last video, we talked about inks and modifiers and how to mix ink correctly for hand pressing blocks. And in this video, I'm going to go through and show you how I hand press my blocks. To get started, I wanted to show you my pressing spoon. This is a $2.99 wooden kitchen spoon that I got at the grocery store. You can see I've used it extensively. It's worn down pretty heavily where I press, and it's about time I get a new one. This is the spoon that I learned on. You can see that it's completely disintegrated. I keep it around as a sentimental token, but it is completely chipped, and if I tried to press with this, it would rip my paper. This is my brayer. I'm sure you're all familiar with this tool. And I've got my palette knife. Over here, I've got my block that we're going to press lined up with my registration. This piece of wood is just an old piece of cardboard that was lying around in our basement. And I went ahead and marked a 2-inch margin both on the bottom and the side. So I know if I put my block right in that corner and I line my paper up with this edge, I will have a nice even 2-inch margin all around my block. So let's go ahead and get pressing. I have my pile of ink from the last video that we mixed. Draw a little line of ink across our palette. Next, we're gonna grab our brayer. We're gonna, in one direction, push the ink. Don't do this, you'll only get one side. You can go this way and this way to make sure it's nice and even coated, but we just want a nice thin layer of ink on our brayer to start with. Come over to our block, and we're going to repeat the same process. We're going to build up small layers across the surface of the block. Nice and slow, moving in one direction with your brayer. If you're going to switch pushing this way to pulling this way, always pick up the brayer between rolls. By going back and forth like this, you're picking up the ink that you've already laid down. You're also driving ink into the small lines that you've carved into this block. By going in one direction and picking up the brayer between strokes, you're making sure that the ink doesn't flood those small details. If I were sending this through a press, I would probably say that's a decent amount of ink, and I would be pretty confident that that would show up the way that I would want it to. But because I'm hand pressing and I can't get the same amount of pressure, I like to add a second small bead of ink and repeat the process. Before we press, I just want to say I see a lot of people globbing ink onto their blocks. I see it all the time. More ink does not mean an easier press. More ink means all of your details will vanish. So make sure you're building up your layers nice and slow, or else you're going to lose a lot of the hard work that you put into the block. All right, now that we've got our block inked, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to line our paper up. Today I'm working with a gray Hanji. If you want to know more about this paper, make sure you check out my first video. I talk about all the different types of papers that I use. This paper is cut so that it's got a 2-inch margin all along the block. Line it up with the corner of my registration block. I have blue painter's tape here at the bottom to secure it. So then we slowly roll the paper over the block, and then it's time to press. Always start in the middle of your block. If you start on the outer edge and you work in, there's more likelihood that the paper is going to slide over your block and create ghost images. You can see the image starting to appear, which means that the pressure is correct and the ink was the correct consistency. I'm not pressing too hard on this spoon, and I'm being really careful around the edges because this paper is delicate and I don't want to rip it. If you get to a point on your block and you want to check to see how the image is coming along, you can pull this paper back and just very carefully check to make sure everything is transferring correctly, and then carefully lie it back down. I wouldn't recommend doing that too often, as it increases the likelihood that the paper will slip, but as long as you have it taped down and you're very careful, you can check to see just to make sure everything is coming out correctly. All right, guys, that looks pretty good. I'm just going to pull this back. All right, looks good to me. I'm gonna take my tape off. And there you have it. I've tried to run this print through a press before, and every time I do, all of these little hair details completely vanish. That's one of the reasons I decided to learn to hand press, was because I was having issues making sure all of my very fine details were coming through. As I'm sure a lot of you have been able to tell, I have some very strong feelings when it comes to ink and rolling, and this is because I see the same mistakes happen over and over again. And I know how frustrating it can be to put so much work into a block and then not have it come out right. Most of that comes down to mixing your ink and primarily rolling it onto the block. Like I said, rolling lots of ink onto your block is not going to make pressing it easier. You saw here how little ink I put onto this, and really I didn't need too much pressure to get this image to come out correctly. I was able to achieve that with just a wooden spoon. So make sure you have a gentle touch and that you're not oversaturating your block with ink. Make sure it's the right consistency, and make sure you're always rolling your block in one direction. Don't go back and forth over the same spot multiple times. Pick your roller up, roll in one direction. I think that about does it, you guys. If you have any specific questions or anything that I didn't cover that you would like me to have, leave those down in the comments below and I'll make sure to read through them and get back to you. If you have any suggestions for future videos you'd like to see in this series, make sure you leave those down below as well. I'll link all of the products that I'm using here in the description of the video. And if you want to catch next week's video, make sure you subscribe and turn on the little post notification so you know when it goes live. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time.